Now, this video is a bit of a journey that starts with vinyl, that stumbles over and then ends up in some kind of hellish pit of despair. But vinyl is where we begin. Big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video, more on that in a bit. What a thing of beauty! The concept is so simple. A continuous groove spins on a turntable, guiding a needle over an undulating surface. This undulation is fed back through an amplifier, and our ears get to enjoy the pure sound etched into the vinyl material. But what about if we play the record backwards? Well, for the most part, we just get the song played backwards. Fairly simple. But we've all heard of the various messages hidden within tracks. Play the record forwards and you barely notice anything, but play it backwards and we get This is the album Secret Messages, released by Electric Light Orchestra in 1983, and which intentionally includes various hidden messages recorded in reverse, somewhat in response to groups who claimed these messages were pure evil, like that scene from The Exorcist, which reveals itself when reversed.
Give us time!
This is a concept known as backmasking, and it has been used for decades. The Beatles were renowned for incorporating it into their songs, with much of it perhaps intentionally added to fuel the conspiracy theories about Paul McCartney's death. Of course, sound played backwards can sound quite disturbing, even without these intentional messages. And along with the Exorcist element, that's probably why many Christian groups in the United States decided it was connected to satanic causes. It even got to the point where, in 1983, a California bill was introduced to prevent backmasking, which can manipulate our behaviour without our knowledge or consent and turn us into disciples of the Antichrist. So there you go, something to watch out for. But what about in video games? I mean, some could suggest that the cassette loading sounds from your typical 80s microcomputer sounded quite disturbing already, especially when it resulted in on-screen messages like this. But what if we were able to take some ZX Spectrum code, record the audio, reverse it, re-record this new audio stream to cassette, and then attempt to load it backwards into the machine? Well, I think you're probably going to be even more shocked than I was with this result. Come on, I've taken you down this road before. You knew I was going to do this. I'm not even sorry. Now, the loading sounds may sound almost identical when played backwards, but of course the binary information to the computer is now garbled. The Spectrum requires a specific format to be able to load data. Very basically, a header is loaded, followed by program data. If you reverse this data, then not only do you throw that all out of the window, but of course the data itself is absolute garbage. Binary forwards isn't the same as binary backwards, and it would be exceptionally hard to make it make sense in both directions. You simply wouldn't be able to create a coherent program that loads both forwards and backwards. The only way you could do it is if you pre-reversed a program and hid it at the end of the cassette that someone could find, reverse, and then load. But of course you knew that, and this is where this tale ends. What kind of shite video would that be? Because that secret program idea carries some weight, just like backmasked messages in vinyl. And this is the start of the song Thank You by the 90s Scottish band Urusei Yatsura, or Urusei Yatsura. The founding members, Fergus Laurie and Graham Kemp, met in the summer of 1993 at the University of Glasgow. They had various very enjoyable and very 90s albums. But on their album titled Everybody Loves Urusei Yatsura, released in the year 2000, they decided to hide a cryptic message. Yep, that's Spectrum code right at the start of the song, and if we take that little excerpt and feed it into a specky, which is pretty straightforward from the CD, you get this little program. Yes, lick his cloven hoof. This is a whole new way to hide messages in songs. It's a simple little program and perhaps an unavoidable digital evolution of incorporating dark messages in backmasking. Many fans who listened to this song likely barely batted an eyelid upon hearing those screeching binary sounds of 8-bit delight, and that's what perhaps makes it such a triumphant hidden message. I had a brief chat with Graham from the band about it, who confirms they didn't expect anyone to find it, and it turns out it was actually drummer Ian who wrote the program on a Spectrum he had stashed away. The idea was that it would be a nice Easter egg, and given the band's appreciation of feedback and distortion, the loading sound was a welcome addition which fitted quite well with the music. The remmed out note saying, "Hi Nick, is Robin there?" is just a running joke in the band, which I couldn't get more details on, but the other included comments are also an amusing and nice touch. But this is far from the only instance of incorporating ZX code within an album. In fact, we can go all the way back to 1983 and begin with Chris Seavey's single, Camouflage. Now, Chris Seavey's story is worthy of a video all of its own, but he is perhaps most notable for his alter ego, Frank Sidebottom, a favourite of many a Sinclair magazine in the 80s. But before all that, during a break with his band The Freshies, Chris would buy himself a Sinclair ZX81 and release this song in that order. The upshot is that side B of this 7-inch disc actually contains 3 Sinclair ZX81 programs written by Seavey himself. So here, it's not a method used to hide a secret message, it's more of a marketing technique to give the single added value. June 1983's Soundmaker magazine wrote, "The world's first computer game pop single is released by EMI Records on Tuesday, May the 31st. Considering the cheapest computer game is currently priced around £5, Chris Seavey's computer game pop record, which sells for the price of a conventional single, could revolutionise the music and home computer industries." Of course, that assumes that every musician can and wants to create a computer game for each single. Although disappointingly, this plan perhaps didn't work as planned, as Camouflage failed to chart, despite this added value, and being a pretty decent song. Now, getting these programs off the disc is actually a lot more painful than you would expect. Even though this data is recorded at only about 250 baud, which allows for some error and distortion, vinyls pose new problems compared to tape. We get crackling, hissing, scratches, not to mention the fact that a slightly incorrect vinyl cut could write off an entire program. I spent a long time cleaning the vinyl down, recording it as a wave, playing with the audio settings, tweaking the levels in post, and trying to get it to load into an emulator. But with the limited time I had, it proved quite fruitless. You can see in the ZX81 tape converter by Simon Holdsworth, there are a lot of identified errors in the waveform. I mean, it's mostly there, but not enough to load in. Thankfully, SoundHog09 actually managed to rip a working version of the first program back in 2011. And actually, well, it's pretty impressive. What you get is really a computerized music video, a sequence of graphics and text which are timed to play with the song. I'll put a link in the description so you can check it out further, but it must have taken quite a lot of Seavey's time to get that right. Soundhog notes that running in an emulator, it didn't exactly sync up with the music however, so this video was edited a little to correct that.
It's possible that by taping the first track on the B side of the single, which incidentally is illegal, you can program it into your set so that it prints out the lyrics.
Even though David Hepworth pointed out it was technically illegal, a June 1983 episode of the Old Grey Whistle Test actually featured the single running on a proper ZX81, and it perfectly synced up. The next program on the disc is called Flying Train, which is a 16K ZX81 version of the Spectrum incarnation that CV released under the publishing name of Random Records, and that included a vocal track, so kind of like this but in reverse. And it's now a highly collectible game, so if you see it, pick it up. And the last program, FT, is the first level of Flying Train for ZX81 owners without a RAM pack. Anyway, I couldn't get these to load despite a lot of fiddling, but it's an ongoing project. In the meantime, if anyone would like the data streams I extracted, I've added them in the video description. Maybe you will have some luck with them. You can see why this marketing technique didn't quite work out though, can't you? Talking about marketing techniques, I'd like to take this moment to thank my sponsor, Squarespace, for making long, ambling videos like this infinitely more possible. I developed websites for years, and trust me, going to a web agency is not a great experience for anyone involved. But with Squarespace, it is mind-numbingly simple. Choose what your site is about, select your goals, and Squarespace will serve you up a whole swathe of options to suit your needs. It's then incredibly simple to customize your site and realize your business or showcase potential. It even makes getting a custom domain a doddle. Head to squarespace.com/nostalgianerd for a free trial, and if you're happy, save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Back to the vinyls. But CV wasn't the only one to cotton onto this new realm. Just a month later, Buzzcocks frontman Pete Shelley would release his second solo LP called XL1. It reached number 42 in the UK albums chart, so nothing blistering, but again contained Spectrum code on both the vinyl and cassette. The vinyl version actually has a lock groove before the Spectrum code, so your nan isn't scared to high heaven when it sounds like the end of the world is pouring from her Amstrad TS-35 in the corner. But for practicality, I've got the cassette version, which makes more sense all round. Again, the last track on side 2 is where you'll find it, but this time it's a program designed to accompany the entire album. A bit like an extended version of the Camouflage computer music video. As you can see, given we're now in a colourful Spectrum, it's a much more enticing affair. They got it to work perfectly on the Old Grey Whistle Test once again, but you have to be careful with this one.
The musical portion of this album is now complete. Computer codes follow.
After listening to the tape message, if you just type load followed by quotation marks as normal, it actually won't run at all. Instead, you need to type load quotation marks code. This tells the Spectrum to load the first machine code file it finds. If you don't do this, then the Spectrum will just throw up flashing search borders and you'll be lost. It does tell you this in the instructions, but I, for one, did not bother reading them. Anyway, once loaded, it asks you whether you are listening to side 1 of the album or side 2. Side 2 requires loading a bit more code, but then you can enjoy the lyrics and effects, which look like you've got a migraine in some instances. Shelley spoke to Electronic Soundmaker magazine in September 1983 and detailed how, although he had ordered a Sinclair Spectrum in 1982, it didn't turn up until 1983, when he had started writing XL1. Sinclair was of course notorious for some late product deliveries at the time. Anyway, Shelley then became obsessed with the pause function in Sinclair Basic and wrote a program which recorded the length of time between key presses. This allowed him to listen to a song and time relevant actions or text on screen to accompany it. Consulting a friend called Joey from Manchester University, a machine code routine was then created to define various graphics, and these were joined together to make what you see on screen. Pretty neat, almost an evolution of CV's work, although with a distinct genesis, which is interesting. But there is more. In November of the same year, none other than the Welsh singer Shaking Stevens released an LP called The Bop Won't Stop, reaching the heady heights of 21 on the UK album charts. Perhaps learning from the difficulties of others, the vinyl version is devoid of it, but on the cassette version there's his very own shaky computer game. Positioned at the end of side 2, just after the last track, It's Late, we get a voiced introduction by Shaky himself.
Hi, this is Shaky. If you've got a Sinclair Spectrum 48K computer, why don't you try my game? The program follows shortly. If you haven't, please fast forward to the end of the tape so that you can listen to the album again.
I'm not entirely convinced that last part is good advice. And given that he calls it a Spectrum 4.8, it becomes clear that his knowledge of the machine was somewhat limited, making this perhaps the clearest indication of being a marketing gimmick. Anyway, this introduction is followed by the sweet tones for the Shaky game, which we can of course just pop into a Spectrum and load up. Developed by Olympic Software, which seems to be the only game they produced, and perhaps we should all be thankful of that, we begin with some introduction text. It's late, close to midnight. You have to help me reach the old house of vampires before my fuel runs out. Watch out for the flying bats, they will drive you crazy. So that's the premise, and of course it is. Flying bats driving a maze? What else would you associate with a Welsh version of Elvis? Great. I tell you what, this game is not going to sell records. In fact, it's on pretty shaky ground. Yeah, I'll get my coat. So by 1984 you might think that record companies would have realised the addition of Spectrum code was doing nothing to help their sales. But apparently the Stranglers did not. The 8th album released by the group, Oral Sculpture, contains those same harsh tones, and actually fared a little better in the UK charts. Maybe the public was coming round to the idea, reaching number 14 in November 1984. It's a familiar story, exclusive to the cassette release. Track 7 of side 2 contains a program entitled Oral Quest, with a quick introduction for the less savvy.
Hello, this is Dave Greenfield. This is a taped message from the Stranglers. You have reached the end of the album, Oral Sculpture, but not the end of the tape. A high-pitched sound after this message is, in fact, the computer code for an adventure game entitled Oral Quest, specially designed for the 48K Spectrum computer. We hope you have as much excitement, adventure, and pleasure as we had creating it for you. Good luck, goodbye.
Now, Oral Quest is actually a text adventure written by the band's keyboard player David Greenfield. He used the Quill adventure system by Gilsoft to create it. A game creator also used to develop Dracula, Castle of the Skull Lord, and Board of the Rings, among others. In this outing, you are the band's tour manager, and your quest, well, it's terrible. Your task is to find and return a massive ear statue, an essential part of the group's act. Whilst you're at it, you need to collect promoter payments and haul it all back to London. Thanks to an online walkthrough, you can do it fairly quickly these days, but God help you without it. What? For fuck's sake. Interestingly, there are actually two distinct versions of this game. The later version looks somewhat more polished, but still yields the same terrible gameplay. Come on guys, at least allow me to answer the damn phone. Okay, we're back to vinyl for the next 1984 release by the British punk band Inner City Unit. Again, this record features a lock groove, and you can even see the difference in the spectrum data part to the rest of the vinyl. It looks smoother, and that's mainly due to the consistent nature of this groove compared to actual music. Now, after a lot of cleaning, I first tried capturing this data digitally again. This didn't want to load in the emulator, so I thought I'd try loading it straight into a Spectrum, a 128K plus, no less. And yes, success friends, it actually loaded. Okay, now this is an interesting one, as it's not a game, more of a database of information. It's kind of like a DVD extras section, and on it we find all sorts, ranging from general information about the band, lyrics of the songs on the album, even a nutrition guide which details the best eateries according to the band, such as Bob's Cafe on the A45 Coventry, which apparently is a jukebox bar par excellence, or Ace Cafe on the A1 in Barnet, listed as being good because dirty, 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 specialist of the house baby's head. Interestingly, this cafe is still open. Maybe I should write a video where I just visit all these places, especially as you get free sauce in Toddington services. I'll take that, thank you. Other standout features include a light show, which resembles something from the Dorling Kindersley Spectrum coding book, and if you click on their discography enough times, you'll sometimes get a random message which says cryptic. I love it! An Easter egg hidden within an Easter egg. And this is a true Easter egg because there's no mention of this Spectrum code anywhere on the album at all. Interestingly, there are at least two versions of this program as well. My vinyl copy loads with the program name of Program Cut 17/10/84, but there's also a copy floating around on the internet which loads as Idiot's Prog. That version, which I will presume is the later release, probably from the cassette, also seems to include a page where you can check your machine's status, which is, well, it's interesting, but also quite a bizarre addition. Which brings me onto the last vinyl I'm going to look at. This time it actually wasn't released as a single, but instead a giveaway disc included with the October 1984 issue of Computer and Video Games magazine. These flexi discs were sometimes given away in magazines simply because they could slip perfectly into the magazine and even be bent without coming to harm. It also means that they can be even more painful to load, especially if you have a heavy needle that will simply drag the flexi disc around with it rather than floating beautifully and elegantly across it. Released as a promo for the Thompson Twins Doctor Doctor single, we get this short intro and then the loading sequence begins.
Doctor, doctor,
Hi, it's the Thompson twins here.
I'm Alana.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Tom, and you're listening to the computer game version of Dr. Doctor.
It's a pop music adventure all about us, with lots of prizes for the first people to solve the puzzles and phone computer and video games with the answers.
We've got t-shirts, albums, posters, and for the first person to solve the adventure, 2 tickets for our next concert and an invitation backstage after the show so that we can congratulate you in person.
Hey!
Now this is another one which needed a lot of cleaning, and even then I could only get a copy to load so far. Handily, this is another one with an image available on Tinternet, and yeah, obviously it's an adventure game written by David Shear, no less. Now these flexi discs didn't hang about for long, not least because of the sheer difficulties in loading from vinyl. The recommended and easiest way for most people was simply to record the program to cassette from your hi-fi and then slot that into your Spectrum, but I imagine the success rate was still pretty low, even with a spanking new disc. But anyway, I'm not going to sit here and play it through. You can if you like. The links to download it are below. Now this sort of thing wasn't just limited to us crazy Brits and the Spectrum. The 8-Bit Show and Tell YouTube channel shows a Commodore 64 program etched into the 1984 album Electric Eye by the Christian rock band Prodigal. This time the data is actually recorded on the runout groove. So, as you can imagine, it was even more tricky to capture, but with skill, Robin managed it and showed us this very short little program. His channel also talks about another program hidden on the 1986 self-titled LP Heartware, another C64 program called Piggy's Fatal Trip. I suggest you go and check out his videos, which I've linked below. There's also hidden data on albums such as the 1990 101 Damnations album by Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine. This time it's right at the start of the track A Perfect Day to Drop the Bomb. But I'm saving this for another day. It appears to be Spectrum data but recorded without the header. It circles back to what I explained earlier. That header data really is essential for the Spectrum to understand what's going on. So then, one last little secret. Fast forward to 2017, and to celebrate 20 years since its release, Radiohead released a special edition remaster of their 1997 album OK Computer, called OK Not OK. It's a cool package containing 3 vinyls. Well, it would do in normal circumstances, but my version, which I'm opening here for the first time, was actually missing all of the vinyls. So, that's great, isn't it? But you also get a couple of books, and more significantly, a C90 cassette filled with demo tracks. It actually does say Radiohead on this cassette, although it's pretty difficult to see on camera. You might be mistaken for thinking the first track on this cassette is about to launch into a Spectrum program, but it's actually the last track on side 2. It's an incredibly short program which boils down to a short introduction about the band members being inside your computer, followed by a random text and colour generator. It actually works quite well in the context of Radiohead music, and if you leave the cassette running after loading, you get this little symphony which kind of works well alongside the on-screen visuals. Okay, computer. So it's pretty crazy where you can find computer programs lurking. It's testament to the versatility and robustness of audio-based loading, but perhaps not when you use it on vinyl. Of course, it can be a pain, and corruption and distortion can even sneak in on cassette, as we all know too well, but it's pretty fun to discover and to be able to load these hidden wonders some 37 years on. Of course, it's not a medium versatile enough to allow loading backwards, but then you knew that before you clicked. Didn't you? You did, right? Surely. Anyway, thanks for watching, and have a great evening. Maybe in the future we can talk about how this evolved into putting software on CD. Nice.